Our third speaker is Xiang, and she's also a PhD student. So her talk today will be about fault tolerance, and it's about fault tolerance using, for handling both soft and hardware errors.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about the scalable in-memory checkpoint for hard and software error protection with automatic restart on failures. So I'm going to wrap up our fault tolerance research, especially the checkpoint and restart research. So this gives the outline of my talk. I'm going to cover 3 sections: our fault tolerance philosophy in Xiang++, the asynchronous checkpoint restart, and also the replication-enhanced checkpoint restart. Well-known as in 3 of overhead. So the fault tolerance strategy may slow down the application, and periodically they need to do checkpoint, so application cannot execute. And there's a recovery overhead on failures. Based on the fault tolerance strategy, they may need to roll back to the previous checkpoint. So our whole philosophy is to optimize for the common case and also minimize the performance overhead. So what is the common case? We found that from the logs of the supercomputer, the failures rarely brings down more than 1 node at a time. So as an example, in Jaguar, the now Titan, the top 1 supercomputer, about 92% of the failures only bring down 1 node at a time. Also, this graph shows the study of the HPC system at different institutions. The system 12 to system 21 is from the Los Alamos National Lab, and also the Tsubame and the Mercury at NCSA. We analyzed and found that above 90% of failure only brings down 1 node crashes. So our strategy agreed to handle handle all the single node crashes and most multiple node failures. We try different directions to minimize the performance overhead. We support automatic restart. So Xiang runtime system can detect failures and immediately roll back recovery. So users don't need to resubmit their jobs if the scheduler won't kill the job if one processor stop responding. So this is support with or without spare processors. We can achieve parallel recovery with message logging so that when 1 node crashes, the other node can help it to do the rework. We support faster checkpoint. So based on the double in-memory checkpoint restart, so in double in-memory checkpoint restart, each node has a partner node to help it store the remote checkpoint, which we call as a buddy node. As shown in the graph, B is the buddy node of A, so each node will do their local checkpoint in their own memory or in their own disk if they require more memory. And then after that, they will send their checkpoint to as a remote checkpoint in their buddy node. So when 1 node crashes, the buddy node of the crash node can send the checkpoint to the crash node to help it recovery. Recently, we support semi-blocking checkpointing in Xiang++ system to help user to asynchronously store the remote checkpoint. So next, I'm going to talk about our recent work about asynchronous checkpoint restart. This work is motivated from our observation that blocking as the checkpoint size keep increasing, the blocking checkpoint becomes the remote checkpoint during the blocking checkpointing becomes a bottleneck, and it takes longer than 30 seconds. So I will first give an overview of the blocking checkpointing in the double in-memory checkpointer strategy. So after a barrier, each node will synchronize to do the local checkpoint and then send their remote checkpoint to their body node. And application can resume computation after all the node has successfully sent their checkpoint to their body nodes. The semi-blocking checkpoint relaxes the second synchronization, as in after the local checkpoint is finished, the application can resume computation. At the same time, the runtime system will take over to send the remote checkpoint to the body node, and the remote checkpoint can be sent at the best time considering the application computation. As in, when there's less application traffic, the charm runtime system will send more checkpoint messages. So this graph shows a single checkpoint overhead for two kinds of application, which is Wave 2D, which is a stencil, 2D stencil codes, and the Changa, which is embodied simulation. We did the weak both separately for both weak scaling and strong scaling of them on Trestles, which is a cluster on San Diego Supercomputer Center. So we did experiments from 128 calls to 1K calls. So as shows that semi-blocking checkpoint can reduce the checkpoint overhead for both cases for more than 5 times. We try to reduce the memory pressure since the double in-memory checkpoint requires to send to store the both local and remote checkpoint in memory. We take use of the solid state drives as they become more available on the supercomputers. However, even though the SSD, the read and write to SSD is much faster than read and write to disk, but they are not comparable to the DRAM. So we carefully select which data we want to write to the SSD and came up with 2 different kinds of strategy, which is the full SSD strategy, which will store both the local and remote checkpoint in SSD, and the half FSD strategy, which will only store the remote checkpoint in SSD. In that case, during the recovery, only the checkpoint of the crash node needs to read from the SSD. So we can achieve faster checkpoint restart using this strategy. And I'm going to show some results in the later slides. The checkpointing to SSD, we can also asynchronously achieve that with the help of the I/O thread. So in this graph, I show that the worker thread is executing the charm application, while the I/O thread is waiting there to receive the SSD request from the application. Either it can be read and write tasks. After I/O thread finishes that task, it will inform the application. The left graph is the checkpoint timing penalty on SSD with different checkpoint size using either half or full SSD strategies with asynchronous or synchronous support. So as we can see that the red one showing the half SSD strategy with asynchronous I/O, it can help us achieve the lowest penalty regardless of the checkpoint size. On the right graph, we show the restart overhead with different checkpoint size using in-memory or using half SSD strategy and full SSD strategy with asynchronous I/O. As we see that restart from SSD doesn't incur much actual overhead. So far, I talk about how we handle the fail stop kind of error, which we call as hard errors, using our checkpoint restart support. Next, I'm going to talk about how our recent study on replication enhanced checkpoint restart for soft errors. A new challenge is the increasing soft error rate in the HPC study. So it is not the soft error, which can be seen as a single event upset, single bit upset is not just come from the cosmic rays as people understand before. The computer electronics sensitivity to radiation is keeping increasing as their dimension and voltage decreases because of the requirements for the high performance and low power. So this graph shows what may happen if the failure rate keeps increasing. The x-axis is the number of sockets, which is from 2K to 1 million. And the y-axis is the FFT, which is failure in 1 billion hours. Its ratio is from 1 to 10K. As we see, this is only with checkpoint restart support. However, it cannot tell us the correctness of the program. So the vulnerability of the application is keep increasing as the number of sockets increases, also as the failure rate increases. We using our partition framework in Charm to handle to give the application soft error protection. So next, I'm going to talk about the partition framework in Charm++. As the previous talks, we have better understanding of the stack in Charm++. So application writing in Charm++, which can take use of the library and language provided by Charm++. And the Charm++ is over the canvas, which can help us schedule the message. And it is on top of the LTS, which take over the communication between the processors. So our partition framework is initially designed for the requirements from the NAMD, which is the molecular dynamic simulation codes, and it is at the canvas level. Well, every machine level which is supported by the LTS can take use of the partition framework, and the Charm++ transparently it doesn't know about the partition framework, so the application is running as it is before. Each processor has a local rank and the global rank. The local rank is in one partition, which is used by the Charm++ runtime system, and the global rank is used by the LITS to send the message. If application requires interpartition communication, they can take use of this converse method, which can transfer the local rank to the global rank to send the message. So we augment our checkpoint restart framework in Charm++ with the partition framework to protect the applications from soft errors. It supports periodical soft data corruption detection. It can automatically correct the software error from the checkpoint. Also, we found there are benefits for hard failure support. Also, there's no need to do the remote checkpointing. So here I'm going to give an overview of this framework. It is extended from the double in-memory checkpointing. When a job starts, it will half of the allocation of the user nodes will run the same job, so it become replica 1 and replica 2 in this case. Remember we have the body node for each node in the double in-memory checkpoint restart. Here we assign the body node to the corresponding node in the replica. So each replica will still do the periodical checkpoint and store their local checkpoint, and at the same time they will send their local checkpoint to the body node to compare if there is a mismatch of their checkpoint to detect if there is a soft data corruption happens. Here we give the overview of overflow of the framework to see what will happen if soft or hard failure happens to the system. So when a job starts, the Charm+ runtime system will launch the job on the half size of the allocation user request, as in the replica 1 and replica 2. They will do periodical checkpoint as shown at T1 and T3 time. And one replica will send the checkpoint to the other replica to compare the checkpoint. At T2 time, a hard error happens to replica 1. After the runtime system detects the failure, replica 2 will send the checkpoint to the replica 1 to help it recover. Then the replica 1 will do the rework and catch up with the execution in the replica 2. At T3 time, another periodical checkpoint time, and then they find that there is a mismatch of their checkpoints. Then both of them will roll back to the previous safe checkpoint, which is T1. After we implemented this framework, we did some initial experiments on BGP, the interpret machine at Argonne. We used two different kinds of benchmark, the Jacobi 3D, which is AMPI version. It is the 3D stencil codes, and the AMD, which is a mini app to mimic the computation performance of NAMD. We did the experiments from 1K to 16K calls per replica, and the time shown as the soft error detection overhead, which includes the local checkpoint time, the time to send the checkpoint to the replica to compare, and also the comparison overhead. Both are weak scaling result. As we see for the Jacobi 3D cases, the checkpoint size is 80 megabytes per node. The result is kind of surprising since the time is doubles from 1K to 2K and then doubles from 2K to 4K. But since the checkpoint size hasn't been changed, so we are expecting a constant checkpoint overhead. For AMD, it doesn't have such problem, and also because it's the checkpoint size for it is small. It's about 1 megabytes per node. As we explore more, we found that the problem came from the network congestion at the checkpointing time. So the left-hand graph shows the default mapping of the replica on BGP machine. So the dark nodes show the replica 1 node, and the empty one shows the replica 2 nodes. The number here is the maximal is the inter-replica message on each link. So by default, the replica is mapped side by side, and the first column of the replica 1, their body nodes is the first column of the replica 2. At the checkpoint time, each of the node will send a message to their body node. So as we see, this link becomes a bottleneck since there's a 4 checkpointing message going through this link. So we did an optimal mapping of the replicas. We put the alternate columns to different replicas. So there's a 1 column gap between the nodes in 1 replicas. So in this case, we put the body nodes of each of the body nodes in as close as possible. After we did the optimal mapping, the maximal inter-replica message on each link becomes 1. Another way to optimize it is to send the checksum of the checkpoints instead of the full checkpoint for comparison. So after applied some checksum algorithm, the message size required at the checkpoint time is only 1 integer, but there are some issue with the checksum. We cannot handle the floating point roundoff error as correctly as it is now. So here is showing some results after optimization. We use the same benchmark on the same machine with the same scaling. As we see that both optimal mapping and checksum becomes constant for the Jacobi 3D AMPI benchmark. And it also helps a little bit for the AMD benchmark. Remember, I highlighted the point that we can do automatic restart on failures. So we implemented the heartbeat detection of the failures, for the hard failures in the runtime system. And then when failure is detected, we can use a spare node which is specified when the user submits a job, and use that spare node to launch to replace the crashing node. This is the case when the killing of the process is supported for the job scheduler. However, in the HPC system, most of the job scheduler will just kill the job if one process is dead. So we try to mimic the restart experiments by implementing a ckDynamo function. Using that function, if we want to inject a failure, we will call the ckDynamo function on that node, and then that node will stop responding to other nodes. After that, we detected that that node is dead from the other processors, and then a spare processor can still be used to replace that node. So we did the experiments for the recovery using the ckDynamo function on BTP machine, and here we see that we show the experiments for the Jacobi and the AMD cases. It goes well for the Jacobi, and the restart overhead is less than 200 milliseconds. And for the AMD case, since there's not much data to recover, but there's some synchronization overhead during the restart to ensure the correctness of the restart procedure. We don't have the network congestion problem during the restart, since at the restart time only one inter-replica message is sent, which is to send to the crashed node. Okay, thanks. This is all what I have, and I'm welcome to questions.
Question maybe I didn't understand well. So in the replica scheme, you seem to duplicate also the double checkpoint scheme. So the second replica also has the double checkpoint. Is that necessary, or I mean you can just replicate the computation itself?
So in fact, it saved one checkpoint instead of having two. We really should have. You answer.
Do you mean we don't need to do the local checkpoint in the other replica?
Yeah. So everyone has two checkpoints. So instead of two, you may just need one to reduce some memory.
It was only one.
Yeah, we don't store the remote checkpoint, but we still need both of them to store the local checkpoint in case we don't know which replica will fail.
Okay.
Can you go back to your slide 12?
Okay. Yes.
In the left chart there, what percentage of the total running time was that for the penalty? I mean, how much? You give seconds, but how much time? Was it 5% slower or 1?
Actually, it's the time penalty for one checkpoint. For one checkpoint.
So do you have?
How often do you do the checkpoint?
Actually,
how much total overhead is there?
How often do you do checkpoint will depend on the mean time between failure of the system, also depends on the checkpoint overhead. So in this case, if I don't write to the SSD, I think the checkpoint overhead is 5 seconds, and then the task is, if you're not writing to the SSD, if you just write to the memory, the checkpoint will be around 5 seconds, and then the time penalty is the actual time we need to store the checkpoint in SSD.
No, but the question is, I understand your point that you cannot answer that question exactly because the checkpoint period will depend on the checkpoint overhead, which varies in these cases. But just pick something and say, give an idea of what overhead.
So we have the modeling of the giving the mean time between failure and the checkpoint overhead, which is from the experiments. So our strategy is about 5% actual to the application.
And can you say in this particular application, you're talking about the checkpoint size in gigabytes here, what is the per iteration time of Jacobi? One iteration of Jacobi, do you know?
I don't remember exactly. I think it's about 1 second on calculate.
So maybe if you do it every 10 iterations, 100 iterations, it will be pretty low. It's good to have that proportion. Pretty
right, and 5% is reasonable if you look at, for example, parity or very basic memory protection. From the very beginning, when we first added parity supercomputers 30 years ago, it was costing something like 30% of the space and power budget just to do that. And we're probably down around 5 or 10% now, and people are happy to pay that penalty.
Right.
So 5% is fine.
Let's thank the speaker here. So this concludes the the first technical session in the morning, and we will do the lunch. Yeah.